Hello and welcome to Breaking Bread with Rivaj Maharaj, where nothing is off the table. For today's episode, I wanted to talk about the briefing that Marco Rubio did regarding events relating to Iran. So without further ado, let's get into it. Marco Rubio has just given a press briefing on a few topics, and one of the questions posed to him by the reporter was regarding the current situation with Iran.
Our next question will be from Elizabeth Hagedorn from All Monitor.
Secretary Rubio, can you confirm the format and location of Friday's talks with Iran and clarify, given that Iran refuses to negotiate its missile program and insists on a right to enrich uranium, is the U.S. open to a compromise if that means reaching a deal to avoid military action? And separately, if I may, how exactly do these negotiations advance President Trump's repeated pledges to help the Iranian protesters, many of whom are likely to see these nuclear talks as legitimizing the very government that violently massacred its own people?
Well, let me first say just on the logistics. At the end, let me back up and say from a big picture perspective, I think it's pretty clear right now, President Trump is willing to talk to and meet with and engage with anyone in the world. I mean, that we don't view meetings as a concession. We don't view meetings as even legitimization. It is our willingness to sit and listen and talk to anyone, any adversary, any ally, obviously, but anyone around the world. And so the president's always been open to that. He showed that in the first administration, and he's showing it again now. And so I think if there's an opportunity to engage directly with counterparts in the Iranian regime, the United States would be open to that, and that's what we're open to. We thought we had an established forum that had been agreed to. In Turkey, it was put together by a number of partners who wanted to attend and be a part of it. I saw conflicting reports yesterday from the Iranian side saying that they had not agreed to that. So that's still being worked through. At the end of the day, the United States is prepared to engage and has always been prepared to engage with Iran. As far as the topic of those discussions and what the agenda needs to be, look, I think in order for talks to actually lead to something meaningful, they will have to include certain things. And that includes the range of their ballistic missiles. That includes their sponsorship of terrorist organizations across the region. That includes the nuclear program, and that includes the treatment of their own people. The fundamental problem Iran faces and the regime faces right now is that what people are on the streets complaining about, this regime cannot address. They cannot address it because it's economic. Those problems remain. And one of the reasons why the Iranian regime cannot provide the people of Iran the quality of life that they deserve is because they're spending all their money. They're spending all their resources of what is a rich country sponsoring terrorism, sponsoring all these proxy groups around the world, exporting, as they call it, their revolution. But I remind everybody what I've been saying through my entire career in public service. I said it in my hearing when I was asking for confirmation through the Senate. The Iranian people and the Iranian regime are very unalike. In essence, what the Iranian people want, this is a culture with a deep history. These are people that are the leadership of Iran at the clerical level does not reflect the people of Iran. I know of no other country where there's a bigger difference between the people that lead the country and the people who live there. And so our hope resides in that. As far as the president's views on the way protesters were treated, he was very clear about it. And as you saw, part of what the president said publicly prevented mass executions that were being planned and we're on the precipice of. And obviously beyond that, the president retains a number of options to how he responds to that and future events. But as far as the talks are concerned, I think the Iranians had agreed to a certain format. For whatever reason, it's changed in their system or what have you. We'll see if we can get back to the right place. But the United States is prepared to meet with them. I think it was scheduled for Friday. Steve is ready to go. He'll be prepared for that. If the Iranians want to meet, we're ready. They've expressed an interest in meeting and talking. If they change their mind, we're fine with that too. We prefer to meet and talk. I'm not sure you can reach a deal with these guys, but we're going to try to find out. We don't see there's any harm in trying to figure out if there's something that can be done. This is a president that always prefers a peaceful outcome to any conflict or any challenge.
Now, there's a few takeaways from here that I just wanted to analyze in order to give you my analysis of what I think is going to happen moving forward, just from the language that was used and the way I interpret what he was saying, just trying to read between the lines. Marco Rubio did say that President Donald Trump is willing to negotiate. He's willing to sit down with the Iranians and listen to what it is that they have to say. Now, again, Marco Rubio is a diplomat. So what he's doing is he's saying that the President of the United States is prepared to entertain the Iranians in talks because he would prefer nothing more than talking rather than military escalation. So in this instance, Donald Trump is being portrayed as somewhat of a benevolent peacemaker type figure. These comments suggest that the ball is now in Iran's court and peace is an option. However, it's in Iran's hands. So the way I look at it is that he's come out explaining that the United States are prepared to navigate the peaceful path. However, the option for escalation lies primarily with the Iranians in regards to their response to these comments and the meeting that the Americans want to hold with the Iranians. Now, if you look at it, this is forming a foundation because should the negotiations not go well, then it's there for everyone to see that the Americans were open to dialogue, they were open to conversation, and it was the Iranians who were not willing to meet halfway. So it's gradually going to ramp up from here. He then goes on to say that the United States was under the impression that they had approval for an established forum between the United States, Iran, and other regional players interested in the dialogue, which was to be held in Turkey. But then he said that he saw contradicting or conflicting reports coming out of Iran. So this suggests that there was an agreement, or at least an implied agreement, and in some way the Iranians have reneged on that agreement. So again, he's placing it squarely at the feet of the Iranians. This is now building up further justification that we're doing everything we can. The Iranians just don't seem to want to play ball. They want to control every facet of these negotiations moving forward. So do you see, the groundwork is being put into place, but very subtly, in a very diplomatic manner. This is also tantamount to accusing the Iranians of almost lying, because an agreement of sorts was in place. Now they've issued a conflicting report. And when you say conflicting report, it means that the Iranians are saying something different. So either there was no consensus, somebody didn't understand, or alternatively somebody is lying. Now you would think that with diplomacy at that level, misunderstandings are some things that are really few and far between, especially on a matter of logistical importance. Marco Rubio then goes on to say that Donald Trump has stressed that on the agenda for the negotiations, there are these 4 critical points that need to be entertained and discussed. And they are that the range of Iran's ballistic missiles needs to be discussed. The nuclear program needs to be discussed. Iran's funding of proxies around the world, terror proxies, needs to be discussed, as well as the treatment of the Iranian people by the regime itself needs to also be included in that discussion. So basically, Iran is being hemmed in. Again, we'll meet, we want peace, let's sit down and talk about it, but these are the conditions. However, the ball is in your court. You have the decision to make. Does this escalate militarily, or can it be resolved via negotiations and diplomacy? Marco Rubio is basically saying, we're trying diplomacy. We really hope that diplomacy will work. However, you're beginning to force our hand, and the military option or the military intervention option is looking increasingly likely. He then goes on to say that Iran cannot deliver to its people what the people of Iran require, which is a decent standard of living, for want of a better words. I'm just paraphrasing here. However, that's the general message. Now, he attributes that to the fact that Iran, being a rich country, is utilizing the money that it has to fund its terror proxies all around the globe. So once again, he's establishing a justification for a military intervention should it need to take place, because he's saying you can't deliver what your people want because you're taking that money and you're funding terror proxies around the world. So he's effectively saying to the Iranians that you do go about funding these terror organizations. That is illegal, that is immoral, and something needs to be done about it. So again, he's laying the groundwork that you are doing something wrong. Unless you don't stop it, you've already been judged. You've already been found guilty. Now, unless you don't stop it, we'll stop it for you. He says further that the void between the Iranian regime and the Iranian people is absolutely enormous. There's just no connection between the two entities. They're totally opposite. Marco Rubio then goes on to discuss that Donald Trump's concerns for the manner in which the Iranian people are being treated is paramount. Now, let's look at this, because the Iranian regime is an authoritarian regime. In order for an authoritarian regime to maintain a grip and a hold on a country, it needs to enforce some level of control. The Shah was the same. He had his Savak in place, and they managed the country in quite a brutal manner, which then resulted in the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Now, the current Iranian regime that came into power after the revolution followed the same playbook, just with a different ideology. So, it's two sides of the same coin. They're heavy-handed, and in order for them to maintain their control and their grip over the country, they need to exercise that control, which sometimes, or more often than not, involves brutality. And if Trump is coming out and saying that he is basically concerned about the Iranians' welfare in terms of how they're being treated by their own state, and he looks at this as him having to step in because it's now morally probably reprehensible, then again he knows that this government cannot survive if it doesn't enact those security measures that it does put in place, no matter how brutal they are. Because if they don't, then there will be a revolution in the country and the government will be toppled. And that could be either from discontent by the public or discontent fomented within the public by foreign interference. Either way, it doesn't matter. It's immaterial, because he's saying that the people's concerns are paramount. And in an authoritarian regime, the people's concerns are the least of the state's concerns. So again, it's like a dog trying to catch its tail. The Iranian regime is being hemmed in. Now, once again, it's not for me to tell you whether this is right or wrong. I'm just analyzing what is being said here. You know, my thoughts on the Iranian regime, my thoughts on, what is happening there, the war, it's immaterial. It doesn't matter. I'm just looking at what Marco Rubio is saying, trying to read between the lines and see and ascertain whether the Americans go to war with the Iranians or whether this is resolved diplomatically. And that answer comes in the last comments made by Marco Rubio, where he says, and I quote, "I'm not sure you can reach a deal with these guys." So when a diplomat goes into negotiations or sets in motion the process of negotiations to achieve a peaceful end to a problem that could otherwise escalate rapidly into a military conflagration. And when that diplomat says that he's not sure a deal can be reached, he's already thrown the towel in. So he's basically shown you his hand. He said, look, we'll just do this for the sake of diplomacy so that 20 years from today it can be seen that the United States gave the Iranian regime every opportunity to come to the table and to basically agree to what we want it to do. They refused. We tried diplomacy. It failed. We had no other option but to go in militarily. That is what I take from Marco Rubio's press briefing that he gave today regarding the Iranian escalation. Thank you for taking the time to spend with us on this episode, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Please remember to like, share and subscribe, as it helps us with the algorithm and it helps our channel to grow.